Great. Thank you, Rob. So what I think we can start with here is, Arun, can you hear me?
Here, I'm just about to start my video. There we go.
All right, good to see you.
Good
So,
morning.
maybe we'll start with Arun. Do you want to just introduce yourself and kind of just explain your role at Minoryx, and then we can go down some other questions in a little bit.
Sure. Thank you. Well, good morning, all. Thank you very much to the Hunter's Hope community for allowing this time for asking questions with the within the medical symposium. So my name is Arun Mistry. I'm a physician by training, pediatrician, with 10 years of clinical practice in pediatrics in the UK and also Australia before moving into the pharmaceutical world about 25 years ago, and then worked in multiple therapeutic areas, but over the past 15 years, mostly in rare diseases and pediatrics. I've been working at Minoryx for 2.5 years now as Chief Medical Officer, looking after, of course, the clinical trials and the studies that we have had ongoing and concluding. Also looking after the preclinical work and ensuring that work is supporting the direction for next steps, and also supporting the clinical studies as we need them supported. And then in addition, working with a whole group, interacting with the agencies like the FDA, EMA, to get the appropriate data together and filings performed for approvals of leukodystrophies in the future.
Thank you, Arun and Angela.
Hello, I'm Angela Tom. I'm Senior Director of Americas for Medical Affairs at Orchard Therapeutics. I've been here about 5 years through the process of sometimes giving up therapies like you guys heard about yesterday, but also the success of bringing through a treatment for MLD. My background, I'm a nurse practitioner by training. I've worked in pediatrics, general pediatrics, and pediatric bone marrow transplant and hemophilia clinically, and I've been in the industry more or less 15 years. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Great. So, I mean, we can start with opening it up to the floor. Does anyone have any questions about MLD or ALD for our representatives? I can walk around and start calling on people. Grade school. All right. So, well, then maybe just to get the discussion started, Arun, maybe you can update us. What's the status of Minoryx's move towards approval, presumably in the EU first, and then is there a strategy for the US?
Sure, thank you. So I think you all saw Dr. Fatemi's presentation yesterday in terms of the data sets that we have. So we are at the moment in the process of finalizing a filing for the EMA for an indication for leukodystrophies for treating ALD patients, so boys and men, for CALD, in a sense treating lesions. So that is underway at the moment, and then in the next few weeks you will see the confirmation of the EMA having received the file. So it's something that we have announced we were going to do, and we are doing that with the EMA. We are using the Nexus study, the pediatric study that Dr. Fatemi presented yesterday, as the pivotal data set with the outcome for the primary endpoint, which has been met. And then supportive to that will be the advanced study, which is the adult ALD study in men with AMN symptoms, but with also some significant data on the MRIs for CALD and also on the clinical events of progressive CALD, where patients who were on the placebo were the only patients to progress to progressive CALD. And then finally, there is the data set, which we have the opportunity of looking at both safety and efficacy from the compassionate use program, where we actually have nearly 140 patients in Europe managed on compassionate product. And in the prescribers are sending through data. We have protocols for the compassionate use with certain countries. So we have some significant data sets. So it's not just the small studies. So that's Europe. And if we are successful, we would have an approval in late summer 2026. In the US with the FDA, we have a pathway which is set from previous discussions and also the design discussions of the Calyx study, which is the adult CALD study, which again Dr. Fatemi presented yesterday. And that study is a placebo-controlled study, as there's not adequate natural history available for adult CALD. We are progressing slowly, as Ali said, on the enrollment into the study. We are nearly at 75%. We should be there over the course of the summer at 75%. So 30 out of the 40 patients will have been enrolled. If we get that study fully enrolled by the end of this year, then we have interim analyses planned at 18 months from the last patient going in. If that is successful, then the study stops, or patients transition to active drug. And with that success, we would be able to take that data to the FDA. So the earliest time point for a potential NDA with the FDA would be mid to late 2027, with a successful outcome of the 18-month analysis. However, there may be an opportunity with the Nexus study having concluded in a positive manner to entertain that study with the FDA to see how they see the space for pediatric ALD. There are challenges, as we heard from Dr. Duncan, with therapies, new therapies, and also not all patients are eligible for HSCT, as we heard from Dr. Orchard as well. So we see a potential unmet need, and we are likely to take that as a discussion to the FDA at some point.
That's really helpful. A follow-up question, or really just speaking to your experience, because, you know, for most of us in this room, we're not on the industry side, and, you know, and so getting a bit of insight. Can you speak to your experience, or what you see, what you see coming down the road prospectively as sort of barriers for approval, given, I'm going to use the term heterogeneity of the data sets, meaning some of the data was, you know, some of the trials were Europe and Central America only versus trials that were done in the US, you know, speaking to Calyx and Advance having US participants versus Nexus, which only has a couple of expanded access patients on it from the US.
Sure. So I think in rare diseases, this is always going to be the case. And it's always difficult to have studies which are going on in multiple regions when the patient populations are so small. The expertise is small as well, in terms of there are only certain centers where a study can be performed with the knowledge of the disease and the potential cohorts of patients. The great thing for patients and the families and the physicians is that there are now multiple, you know, products in many of the indications and diseases that you've been discussing over the past 2 days coming through. That makes challenges for enrollment as well. So there's a front end challenge that comes up from, there's a competition for patients coming into a study. In terms of where agencies will take those sorts of heterogeneous data, they're actually quite open to that. I think so long as the studies have been conducted well, according to good clinical practice, which is the guidance is, but also these are now virtually legal requirements for clinical studies across the world. So long as the studies have been conducted under those, the agencies are fine. Standard of care in many of these indications, when there are no other treatments available, or there is the final treatment of transplant, is typically supportive care or watchful waiting. So there's, of course, the other background of the standard of care of supportive treatment, which may be different between, let's say, India and the Western countries. But it doesn't change too much when you have, let's say, for ALD and adult CALD, a time span of a median of, we think, around 3 to 4 years prior to death from the diagnosis of a GAD positive lesion. So there's the time, for disease that progresses quickly, that shouldn't make too much of a difference. And then finally, agencies are more open to real world data, where they would see that as the compassionate use data. It's, of course, not as a clinical trial, but so long as the data are going in the same direction, the data are collected well and analyzed appropriately, that again is information that the agencies are taking on board much more than they would have done in previous times.
Thank you. Really, really appreciate the insight. Katie.
It's nice to see you. I just am wondering, are you, for the pediatric one, are you thinking you're going to be getting an indication as a bridge to transplant or as an alternative to transplant in kids that have a smaller lesion and are in a country that's able to safely do transplant?
So nice question. The pediatric study and data that we have is for patients who came in with GAD negative lesions. So in a sense, not eligible immediately for a transplant, but undergoing regular and more urgent MRI monitoring. And also patients who came in with GAD positive lesions. What we see for all of those patients is that as soon as the treatment is started, the lesions grow less quickly. And we know that these lesions grow very rapidly. So there is an opportunity with this product of slowing down the disease when patients have got GAD negative disease and potentially avoiding a transplant. Because we have seen from the data that 6 out of the 9 patients who came in GAD negative have remained GAD negative for over 2 years. So again, that's a clear signal that something is not the same as it should be for natural history. And then for the patients who came in with GAD positive disease, and the study was designed with, of course, the appropriate rescue to transplant. So patients from the study could go to transplant if deemed appropriate by the clinician or request by the family. And even in those patients, because there is this time lag, and I think Dr. Mallack Eric presented yesterday that it can be 100 days, 120 days, at least until the transplant occurs. There's that window for when a treatment could be ongoing. It's an oral suspension, so it's not a complicated administration that can be started immediately. So there are several scenarios, and then also there are patients who are not eligible for transplant with GAD positive disease, maybe with a less score that just goes over the boundary of eligibility. And again, we have from the compassionate use data patients who do have some level of stabilization of their lesions and even stabilization clinically. Of course, it's not as per a clinical trial. However, we have several instances where patients seem to be doing better than would be expected without this therapy. Again, we're following those patients long term. So we see this product being valuable across the spectrum of CALD.
Thank you. So what I want to do is, Angela, I saw you taking some notes. Do you have any comments you'd like to share?
Well, I was just paying attention to the fact that they're using data from compassionate use to move forward. And I think that was also apparent in our integrated analysis when we filed the BLA in the US for MLD. So I think perhaps it's a good way to keep things moving forward in these ultra rare diseases with complex therapies.
So what we'd like to do is give Orchard some time too, and switch gears a little bit here. So we know that Orchard's helping with some of the newborn screening efforts. Would you sort of outline some of that for us and maybe give us some updates?
Sure. Well, just first, the question is, what is industry's role when it comes to newborn screening in the context of new therapies in these ultra rare diseases, right? That's always a question. But Orchard does have the only approved therapy for MLD in both Europe and the US. And really, how will newborn screening be able to keep pace with the development of new therapies that meet the Wilson and Younger criteria, right, moving forward? So those are kind of the big questions in the world as we moved into our European and US approvals. And obviously, many patients are not eligible for our therapies because we cannot diagnose them pre-symptomatically. And our therapies work best in children who are treated in their pre-symptomatic state. Right. So what do we do as industry partners with the community? Well, we connected the dots. We created the alliance to bring together scientists, advocates, and clinicians to work to break the barriers, to help strengthen the evidence to move forward in multiple countries around the world. Learned from the leaders in the newborn screening communities from the work that had been done before Orchard was here, right? And so really moving forward, we've achieved a lot, right? We filed a package for the RUSP. We have pilots around the world that are generating evidence that publications are coming out with authors from many of you in the room. And we want to continue to support the community and be a partner and let you drive forward what's needed. So what's next? Hopefully, screening and labs being able to set up screening, having the appropriations to be able to support the machines they need, that's personnel they need, the structure, buildings that they need. We understand all of those challenges, but we need to let you take the lead and ask us for what support you would like. Yeah, and I think many of you have read the publications, so I don't want to go through too much of the detail there. But really, what's the future challenge? We are moving into a world of genomics, genomic testing, and biochemical testing. How do we not hinder progress, but keep newborn screening moving forward? It's kind of the question for you. Yeah.
I appreciate it. And so there's no questions specific to newborn screening. One of the other questions for you and Orchard is, can you tell us a little bit about what's in the pipeline? What in being sort of forward-looking, can you tell us a little bit about the projects that are ongoing and entering clinical phase?
Right. So we have two clinical stage programs, one for MPS I Hurler's syndrome. That has completed enrollment. The last patient has been treated in the phase 3 clinical trial. And we will wait now for the 2-year outcomes and BLA filing. We will file in the US first and then Europe. For MLD, we filed in Europe first and then the US. So that's the update on MPS I. And MPS III is in phase 1 clinical trial. MPS III is at Manchester still, and we are pending sort of maturity of the data before making a decision regarding a phase 3 clinical trial for MPS III.
Great. Question?
Yeah, Jen in Chicago. Can you comment on the plan to make these therapies available for the states as the states roll out newborn screening. Right now, we have these centers across the country. And so I think I know we're setting up a site in Chicago, which I'm excited about, but I think that's going to be a big barrier. In addition to newborn screening, a barrier is going to be travel and insurance and getting the therapy.
Sure. There's kind of 2 points there. We do currently have 5 qualified treatment centers in the US, and we are rolling forward with a handful more of qualified treatment centers. And we have to thread the needle really between having enough qualified treatment centers to make travel easier for families, to allow for state-to-state Medicaid. As Paul mentioned yesterday, it is a challenge, state-to-state Medicaid, but I will tell you that all patients who are eligible for therapy and wanted it got approval and were reimbursed for their treatment so far in the US. So while it is difficult, we work in all hands on deck mode when there is a patient in front of us from a company perspective. So all resources go towards, does that patient get what they want and need? With the additional treatment centers, there's cost involved in getting them up and running, both on their end and ours. And so we do want to be careful. We can't have a treatment center in every state with the number of patients that will present, right? Because then you have a treatment center getting one patient every 5 or 10 years. So it's sometimes just the practicality of it, but understood that there are concerns around state-to-state travel, both for the patient burden as well as for the reimbursement, but then also making sure that qualified treatment centers see enough patients to maintain competency with the delivery of the therapy and have the proper sort of internal expertise regarding the disease state. Did that answer your question? Thanks.